Good evening, everyone, and please be welcome to the Dubai Millennium Amphitheater. So today we have a very special show. We are part of the Emirates Lit Festival, an Emirates Literature Festival being held from February 3rd until the 13th in Al Habtoor city. And as a part of that, we have a world premiere here and now in the Dubai Millennium Amphitheater in Expo 2020 Dubai. But I have a very special guest to explain you all about it. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on to the stage to Mrs. Shama Noman. Thank you, Shama. I'll leave it out for you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shama, and I'd like to welcome you all to this wonderful evening of spoken word, music, and poetry. This is one of hundreds of events lined up this year at the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature, but one of the two very special events happening at Expo 2020. So thank you for being here. I'd like to begin by giving you, the audiences, a huge round of applause. And basically to everyone who was able to make it through the UAE traffic on a Monday night. Let's not forget those heroes of ours. On this stage tonight, New York, Nashville, and UAE unite. Let me begin by introducing our fabulous artists for this evening. Dr. Afra Atiq is an acclaimed Emirati spoken word poet. She has performed internationally, including events in India, Germany, and the UK. Afra holds a PhD in media and creative industries and is the co-founder for Untitled Chapters. Please put your hands together for Dr. Afra Atiq. Welcome, Afra. Carlos Andrés Gómez is a Colombian-American award-winning poet, a star of HBO's Def Poetry Jam, TV One's Verses and Flow, and Spike Lee's #1 box office movie, Inside Man with Denzel Washington. Please put your hands together for the wonderful Carlos. Can we have you on stage, Carlos? Ladies and gentlemen, last but not the least, we have Brent Shuttleworth. Brent is a Nashville-based singer, songwriter, and producer. Let's welcome our multi-talented Brent to the stage now. And now I'll hand it over to the artist so you can sit back and enjoy this multilingual, multi-genre performance in celebration of the power of language to transcend divisions and boundaries and give us a path to the sublime. Enjoy.
I feel like this was much higher this morning at the rehearsal. Sorry, technical difficulty. Let's just... Oh, that's not how you do it. Can I just... Sorry. I'm very, very tall, so this is what we have to do. Snapping already, I love it. Thank you. Okay, let's try this again. So I'm Dr. Afra Atiq. I'm so excited to be here to share the stage with my friends Carlos and Brent, but also to be in the company of everybody here. It's an extraordinary moment, I think, for poetry and for literature. So I'm going to ask a favor of the audience, little audience participation there. So, everybody say poetry. Really? Let's try this again. Everybody say poetry. Much better. Okay, so the way this works is I'm going to do poems. You are hopefully going to enjoy them. If you hear something you love, you can snap. This section over here is already snapping. This section over here needs to start snapping. But The reason why we snap is because it creates a nice collaborative environment and lets me know that I'm doing a good job and that you are not bored and that everybody is having a good time, which is important with poetry. So the first poem I want to share with you tonight is a poem that is, it doesn't really have an official title, but I've been calling it Storytelling If You Do Nothing Else. And it addresses a question that I get asked a lot and a question that I think most poets have been asked at one point or another, and that is, why do we need poetry? So this is storytelling if you do nothing else. I once walked into a classroom to teach a workshop, and as I looked at the charming faces of the entire second grade, I mustered all of my enthusiasm and I said, "I'm a poet." To which one of the children replied, "Wow, you have the most boring job." True story. I said, "I am a poet, and it is my job to take words, fold them into tiny paper airplanes, send them out into the world, and hope they get where they need to go. This is what we do, unapologetically. We write stories, songs, and poems, turn everyday objects into extraordinary. How wondrous it is to see cardboard tubes and imagine them into spyglasses. Blue seas swishing in the distance, how wonderful it must be to have words dancing across stories, to befriend monsters and know plot twists and adventure, to know that page is not blank. It is a canvas with outstretched arms waiting to hug its next ideas, to dissect and reconstruct our world, because we are taught that it is impossible to calculate compassionate characters. Common sense tells us that we cannot quantify imagination, that only impact is measurable where there is impact. The energy of an object is converted to work. This is about putting words to work, because if we have learned anything, it is that collectively we can rise. Skip through stars like they were pebbles on a quiet river. You and me and us and we are connected in ways as old as the earth, but maybe I'm just optimistic. Outside of the box. فإذا تكون خارج المألوف وتعيش بدون قيود الصندوق ستجد أن هناك قصة تعيش بداخلنا على خط رفيع بين واقع تجاربنا وأبعد آمالنا. قصة نغير مجراها بالخيال والفكر لتكون وأكون ونكون، لنقرأ ونتخيل ونتأمل مستقبل أحسن أفضل أجمل وليس أسهل. So write stories, read poems, put your words to work, because here lies a story and a poem and a once upon a time. They do not rhyme or sing, and they will not become unless you make it so. So if you do nothing else, make it so. Thank you. So that was actually a true story, that I walked into a classroom and they told me I had a boring job, and I was kind of taken aback, and I thought this is such a great way to address the question through a poem. And you know, the life of a poet is very, I think it's an occupational hazard that we deal with a lot of rejection, and we deal with a lot of times feeling like we are the underdog. And has anybody here ever felt like they were the underdog at anything? It doesn't have to be writing. Show of hands. I love it. It's an honest crowd. And that is amazing, because I think poetry is about honesty. And this poem that I want to recite to you is called Shira'. Shira' is the Arabic word for sail, like sail of a boat. And I like to think of it as an ode to the moments where you feel like an underdog. Because quite often in our lives we do feel that way. And I love it because when I was writing this poem, I was speaking to my other friends who are creatives and writers, and I asked them, tell me about this rejection, tell me about your pain, tell me about your experience, tell me what it's like. And I wrote a poem that is an ode to those things, because I think it's important to take these experiences and do something creative with them. Clap your hands if you agree with me. There you go. So this is a poem called Shira'. The fastest way to kill a poetry performance is to be generic. The fastest way to kill a dream is to suffocate it. Squeeze out every last breath, wedge it between the words realistic and unattainable, wrap it in blankets of self-doubt and tell it, it has no place here. Ostracize and outcast until no one recognizes its face or speaks its name. Kill off passion. Make sure that if the dream ever dares to show its face here again, the dream has no friends and nowhere to stay, so when they tell you, you can be anything you want to be. They mean something within reason, within the constructs of a society that dictates what is acceptable. Find a job that is acceptable. Silence your passion, watch your dreams, like a silent movie on repeat. When I tell them I'm a poet, when I tell them I am a poet, they look at me like a failed business venture. A sorry, we can't meet with you. Call us back when you have a stronger proposal. Poets and entrepreneurs both know convention is just convenience we use to convince ourselves that our dreams are worthless, that we are worth less than is customary, convicting us with no judge and a fact-lacking jury. Your Honor, I move to dismiss the motion of the notion of the continuous, quote, status quo. You can't quell my concern, and yes, you can direct quote me on that. Let's recap. They say they like my flow, but I know that it means that we object to this rejection. Let the record show we know it is never about the final destination. It is about how badly we want to get there. This is for people who want to get there. The underdogs, who know they can beat the odds when the deck is clearly stacked against them. They are not misfits. They are perfectly placed apostrophes. The difference between Y-O-U apostrophe R-E and you are this is about survivors like us, skin grown thick like armor, riding through life like a battlefield. We are knuckles bruised from knocking on doors that said they'd never open because our ideas were never good enough by those who stuffed the makers of change like monsters in boxes in bedtime stories. We are forced to roam around under cover of darkness, the ones who forgot how sleep feels because their dreams are more important than rest. No wonder they say 2 a.m. was made for the artists. We know this is not the quickest way to become famous. It is about looking at what is and figuring out how to change it. It is about life slapping you across the face and you screaming back, I got this. This is me. This is me. Being asked to spell the word unnecessary in the 6th grade spelling bee, replacing a C with an S, 2 S's with a C, tripping over my words, not seeing what I was saying, stuttering off the stage in shame and coming back a slam queen. This is for him who knows his app can revolutionize the way we see business, saves his allowance because investors won't take a chance on someone armed with just a dream and a business plan under the age of 19. This is for her with a passion that can outshine the stars in a voice like an anthem. We've lost too many stars to this life's brutal clenched fist. This is not a motivational speech. This is a call to discover that no amount of training and social conditioning can change what you believe in, so open your arms. Leave your hearts out like a welcome mat. Turn on the porch lights. It's been a starless night for far too long. Let the dreams know. Let the dreams know it's time to come home. Thank you. With that poem, I think that I really hope that everybody here tonight has the courage to go after their dreams. It's not an easy thing to do, and quite often we are told that we can't do things and that we shouldn't be doing things. And the thing about dreams is they're yours. They don't belong to anyone else. And so I would just encourage all of you to go after your biggest and wildest dreams. Speaking of which, so you may or may not find this hard to believe, but at one point in time, and I like to write poems about situations that have happened. And at one point in time, somebody told me, and I quote, Afra, you could never be a poet. And my shock wasn't that they told me that I couldn't be a poet, but it was the word never. It was the word never that was kind of final, and it was just you. It's not that you can't be a poet, but you are never going to become a poet. So I think that the best way to deal with these situations is to lead by example, and me being me, I wrote a poem about this, about that moment, and this is a poem called Numbers. They say there is no equation for the number of times you will try and fail. Failure is the product of effort and imagination divided by the number of setbacks. I am not good with numbers. You said I was your 7. I was your perfect prime number, not divisible, undeniable. You said 7. It was 7 times I would look for you before I realized you weren't coming back. 9 times I repeated the song you played me when you strummed your guitar. 4 years since the last time I saw who I thought I knew. 5 is the number of years I spent in college. 11 is the number of people who graduated because of me, who would never know or see a college degree without help from me. It was the 2nd of August, 2013. 2 plus 8 plus 2 plus 0 plus 1 plus 3 is 16. The year I learned that friendship sinks and not every hand held out is a hand worth holding. Last time I held a hand, it was in a hospital room. I tried to play by the rules, but that's a lie. Lies go full circle, like pupils dilating, like dialing on an old-fashioned telephone. 05054. I still remember your phone number, but I never let it ring, so I settle for the dial tone. 12 is how old I was the first time I ever felt unbeautiful, because he said I was. 21 is 12 backwards, the year I realized that my thinking was backwards. Words cut stranger shapes from strangers' words, letters A's, B's, C's, D's, D's. Each number bears a significance that we cannot see until we experience that instance where we realize who we are and why we are them. I remember you said I could never be a poet because I could never be able to rhyme 100 words together, and you're right. I can't give you 100 words. Instead, I'll give you 255. Here's 200 just because, and 55 for good measure for every time you said my words wouldn't take me anywhere. Hand in hand, holding, folding, touting, telling truth, no use, lies, it's fine this time, lies don't fly sky high, you and I not seeing eye to eye, we never walk together, drifting apart as my art, words on my brush, hush, don't say a word. A picture's worth 1,000 words unheard, absurd, I remember rains as planes, the trains of our thoughts, so we bought a penny, for your thoughts a penny, for the many times we replayed that September before the last December, when we spin, splint, stash, stash, live, outside the box, unlock, stop and stop. I remember you said I could never be a poet because I could never rhyme 100 words together, but I've never been good with numbers. Salamatkum, shukran. Even as somebody who loves words as much as I do, that was a lot of words. I think there is this misconception that I've personally had and that I know a lot of people have about being loud. And I've recently learned to appreciate the quiet moments. And so the poem that I don't know if Carlos is still here, he's here somewhere, but, so the original draft of this poem I actually wrote a couple of years ago when Carlos was visiting and we were having karak, and I had this idea for a poem, and I was talking about it, and Carlos is sitting across from me, and then Carlos suddenly stopped talking. And I kind of thought to myself, okay, Carlos, why are you not talking? Like, why am I talking about this? And he says, I'm not going to say anything until you finish writing that poem. So basically, he stared at me for the next duration of our of the karak, dalla kamla, and until I wrote the poem. So I'm very grateful for that push. So that he wrote. That's how the original draft came to be, and then through the editing process, it's changed quite a bit. So. This is the next poem I'm going to share with you. It's called, well, it doesn't really have a title yet, so. For all intents and purposes, we're going to call it, I Was Raised Never to Yell. Okay, ready? You can clap, it's okay. I was raised never to yell, told never to shout unless I absolutely have to, but how do you even say things without yelling? I must be heard, and to be heard, I must be loud. In poetry slams, they give you just 3 minutes. Start the clock. 3 minutes to make you care about something, to feel something. 2 minutes and a half, I told my life story, and still nobody is listening. So I yell. It goes against everything I was taught. My bones know I should not be yelling. Never shout unless you absolutely have to. Bearing the wounds of generations passed down like hand-me-down clothes. Battle scars from being told to sit down. Be quiet. Be silent. Be still. Be unnoticed. Speak only when spoken to. Speak only long enough to still be considered acceptable. I must be loud. I need my voice to carry. Be the loudest in the room, because being loud means you are being heard. Remember your words, Afra. 2 minutes and a half, and for the first time in my life, I am speechless. Forgetting words that live in the crevices of my vocabulary, I must be heard. Words perched in my throat despite me asking them politely, please, 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 please don't fail me. I must be heard, and to be heard, I must be loud, carrying a community between my shoulder blades, because what are words if they are not known? ليش ما تعرفين عفرة? Be known, Afra. Be loud. Be anything other than other, loud enough to tell them this isn't how the story goes, but you're woke now, Afra. Stories are now narratives and counter-narratives, noise coming at you from all angles, geometry of vocabulary now marching down the words. There is no right answer. This is the stuff of nightmares. Recurring conversations, she's just the performer, just the entertainment, just rewriting rhyming words. Use your words, Afra. No. This is the remix. A reminder that I can take your just, your only, your J-U-S-T and give it new context. Poet and scholar equal measures PhD and poetry. Doctora moves paper to voice, vocally verbalizing verbs in my vernacular, which is particularly perplexing to the parts of people who try to pacify and paint poets, packing them into parcels and padlocking them shut. Just a spoken word poet, I will take the stakes and raise them in language, in lugha, in the long, just from justice, from justia, from voice to poems to speak, من العدالة للعدل, من اللغة للمشاعر للشعر للقصد إلى القصة إلى قمة مقاومة القصيدة التقليدية. I will take everything to tell my story until my voice bends time and space. 1 minute left. I will walk into classrooms and tell the kids to sing like no one is listening to love, like no one is hurting to speak, like everyone is listening, speak, like everyone is listening, speak, like everyone is listening from mountaintops to valleys in places you've never heard of. Shout it from the rooftops like they don't know what your words will become. 30 seconds, Afra. Feel your voice rise from your lungs like a patriot to an anthem. Time. Remember your words, Afra. Use your words, Afra. Truth spoken through marble staircase spine. Flex your vocal cords. Always, like everyone is listening. Thank you. So make some noise if you're having a good time. Noise and whistles, this is amazing. I love this energy. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight and you know, sharing this space and enjoying poetry and you know, supporting poets and the festival as well. So the next poem that I'm doing, I actually haven't read publicly, so I'm very excited about sharing it. That's Carlos is clapping, I can hear it. So one of the things with poetry is there are so many different forms of poems. There are so many different variations. And I think when I started the poetry journey, I think I was committed to one form, and then I didn't really want to try out other poetic forms. And I wrote in different forms very recently, and I thought, hey, this actually isn't so bad. So I will be sharing the next poem with you. It's a sestina, which is basically a poem that has different words repeated in different places throughout the poem. So there's a lot of words that you'll hear again and again. So the topic of this sestina is the idea of good and bad poetry. So somebody once referred to me not as a poet, but as a poet. And I didn't really know what that meant until I started thinking about everything. And so I wrote this sestina about that moment. And this idea of, you know, good poetry and bad poetry and regular poetry, when really poetry is such an amazing art form because it transcends so many different barriers and different obstacles. Okay, ready? Ready for my first public reading of this poem? Bismillah. Where will we keep all this bad poetry? How do we keep it from tainting the good poetry? How do we keep the secret of the poet? I often find myself wondering where good poets who write bad poetry go. Perhaps back to their poetry home, the first place they tried to build words into a house, the first memory of a poem forming beneath stained glass ceilings in an empty house. Maybe they tried to salvage from the ashes of ink and burnt manuscripts they called not worthy of poetry. The English literature major who declared that they would not even entertain the idea of your poetry on their bookshelves until I won an award. Now she sits across from me at dinner parties and tells her fellows how she always knew I was good. Which makes me think that bad poetry is destined to live in a cage between quotation marks as a poet, to never wander into the midst of non-quotation mark poetry, to stay just beyond the fences of perfectly curated bookshelves and poetry houses, and no need to find an excuse to leave the places you never wanted to go. Instead, you find the street corners with the odd poetry, where they host poetry readings and no literature experience is required to be considered good. Have the time of your life and think, if you wished hard enough, this could be home. Maybe this could be home. No one calls you with palpable disgust that spoken word poet who won a prize. That one, true story. That one who reads on stages for snaps, for crowds. There are no question credentials or literary interrogations in this house of poetry. Go. Go as far as the stretch of image and imagination will take you. Go, knowing that even if you write bad poems, you can always come home, back to the poetry. Bad poems can come from good poets. Blood, brick, and mortar to build this house of you on pillars of good and bad. Imagine the best of the good. Now imagine how many discarded words and poets never dared to poetry their houses into a home, thinking that a bad poet comes from writing bad poetry. Good does not always mean finding a home. Go, for you are a poet. Lay poetry like foundation to the place that says, to all poems. Lay poetry like foundation to the place that says, to all poems, this is your house. Thank you. The poem that I'm going to leave you with, sometimes I feel like it is the poem that chooses the poet, I think sometimes. And sometimes you're adamant about reading something and not reading something, and the poet chooses you. So I feel like this poem chose me. It is a poem that I want to leave you with. It is a poem that actually everybody was telling me to read, and I kept saying, no, I don't want to read this one tonight. But it seems that the poem, Danabelle is laughing because she was that person, but it is a love poem. And I think the most profound thing you can do is to love yourself. And this poem came from a prompt that had to do several things. So the poem, the prompt was to imagine that you turn out to be the love of your life. And the poem had to do several things. So in the poem, you had to bring yourself a gift, and it had to be something only you knew you needed. So it's called Gilded Heart, and it is the poem that I want to share with you. Ready? Bismillah. Under the gilded chambers of your heart, marveling at everywhere it's been, I wonder if there is room for me. I'm in awe of the doors, though they are closed, they're beautiful, carved and painted gold veins like delicate wrought iron flower-filled trellises winding over smooth muscle. Ancient wisdom woven into the fibers, despite the rumors and the lack of welcome mat, I stand in the doorway with a pie in one hand, because I know better than to show up at your home empty-handed. I'm terrified. I wonder if you will like me, because like me, you are skeptical of literally everyone. The past perched on your shoulders like a vulture waiting to feed, each greedy gaze a reminder that you are not worthy of being loved. A dull ache, just present enough to remind you that no matter how many poems you write into existence, love is not something that is meant for you. I know you probably won't open the door, but if you do, I tell you, I left a piece of myself with the best clockmaker I know so they can stitch together our existences, if only for a moment long enough for me to tell you. I would tell you. I bartered to unbind you from your deadlines and meetings, And the 6 alarms you set yourself every morning, all 3 minutes apart because you like odd numbers and even spaces, when the only thing you should be setting is music to this beat so you can dance, like you would have danced at all the parties you weren't invited to, that 7th grade birthday party on a Thursday, pretending to be interested in your blue shoelaces so no one would see you were the only one who wasn't included, and who needs their party anyways? I would show you that the northern lights are only a matchstick in the dark and you are the entire horizon. If I could give you anything, I would give you this basket full of everything you needed but never received. Closure, assurance that you are on the right path, time, if only to see that nothing was ever really broken, time, if only you knew how much it can help. I'd smash all the moments you thought you weren't good enough and mosaic them into a disco ball. Then I'd ask you to dance. I know you don't dance, but create movement in the solitude you've called home. For too long, we will waltz into the people we will be better for becoming. And yes, I know disco balls don't go with the waltz, but you have a flair for the dramatic, and I have a wild streak. I know there are things you swore you would never immortalize in a poem. A broken grandfather clock, a bruised bookshelf, a conversation in the hallway in 7th grade, the crushing weight of this grief. But one day, someday, we'll tell this story about your gilded heart with the carved doors, tell this story to the world about how you opened the door and there it was, your face staring back at you. Pie and gift basket in hand, endless staircases under your feet, and you will say, we will tell this story, and you will say, welcome home. We've been expecting you. Thank you so much. You have been an incredible audience. Thank you so much to the tech team, to the host, to the MC, to everybody that made this possible. Thank you for sharing your time and your energy and your love. Thank you to the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature and the Emirates Literature Foundation and their partner, Dubai Culture, for making this all possible. I am endlessly grateful that I was able to share this time with you, so thank you.
Give it up one more time for Dr. Afra Atiq. Big thank you to everybody from the World Expo for having us, everybody from the Emirates Airlines Festival of Literature. If you are grateful to be alive, make some noise. If you're grateful to be alive, make some noise. Make some noise. Make some noise. We knew those aisles were much more than just concrete. They were sacred. A once-in-a-lifetime shot, so we smuggled ourselves into the floor seats to watch Michael Jordan play basketball. For the final 2 minutes and 37 seconds of the only game he'd ever play on his 30th birthday, thousands headed for the exits, because the winners had been decided, they believed, to get a jump start on going home. I saw Michael Jordan play basketball in his prime from floor seats because some Sears and Roebuck regional vice presidents had some phantom traffic to evade. Or maybe just never even showed up. In my blink of an eye on this earth, may I be struck down by lightning before I ever RSVP, maybe. Rate my birthday party a 6 out of 10 after I dance with my sister. Before I walk out on Otis singing or Basquiat painting to go beat traffic. Miss out on a chance to live so I can catch up on sleep when you're in a rocking chair. If you're so blessed to make it that far, with your aching and failing joints, your arthritic and curling limbs, the flailing novel of your life rolling out from behind you like a field of swollen marigolds, do you want your memories to be neatly tucked into Rubbermaid bins in your garage, with nothing in them but records that skip and old photo albums full of multiple copies of the same Polaroid? You, in your recliner, by yourself, watching another bad sitcom rerun. In a recent study of senior citizens, it was found that people rarely regretted most of the things they had done. Overwhelmingly, it was the things they had not done which filled their regret list when they reached old age. This is not a rehearsal, but it sure as hell might be a test. Is there anything still beating in your chest? I sometimes get tired and notice sand sliding through my hands. When I'm on a rest, I am done with the days of, yeah, I'm definitely gonna try my best to make it. So much of this life is what you make of it. It's just about arriving through that door, but most of us never even make it out of bed, like Yoda said. Do or do not. There is no try, and there won't be a second one. Forget beating traffic. Leave your car in the parking lots. Let the tears stain your face as you run through the rain. Your arms outstretched, alive, like the last few gasps before going under. Like a supernova, seen alive behind still traveling lights. We wonder, are you still there? Awe and wonder, are you still there? An echo after lights like thunder. My God, we're still here. We made it. If you're grateful to be alive, make some noise. Expo Dubai 2020. Give it up for musical savant, genius, producer, and my best friend, Brent Shuttleworth, all the way from the United States. My little sister loves to read books. We'll spend an entire afternoon doing nothing, but something she's not supposed to be able to do. Don't be fooled though. By the fluttering pages in her palms, she's channeling Da Vinci, inverting words like a fresh bruise. Turned tangerine orange, she picks the ripe hurt from a swaying branch in a chapter. And we both hear Albert Einstein's words echo up from the floor. If you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. My little sister Maya likes to read fairy tales. Has always loved fantasy, it's where we built her playground. She is Leonardo minus the mirror took years for people to read what everyone thought was Da Vinci's own invented language, when all he did was just write backwards. And just like Einstein and Leonardo, Maya has a gift. Some don't think so and call her dyslexic. She is a genius to her. Coded like the paragraphs her potent mind distills. But while kids repeat monotone words from a teacher who might as well be a cartoon parrot, or a doll's audio recorded voice, or a hooked on phonics tape acting as a babysitter, while kids stuff their mouths with dull letters and muted sounds, Maya is in the daydream. They try to beat her down with a 4-letter acronym baton, but she's too busy directing the orchestra with her magic wand, a symphony of mixed chlorophyll-tinged pastels, constellation framed with songs of a summer breeze-drenched field. Maya's dancing in an open clearing in the woods, scrawling out recipes with Mozart in sweaty rooms of overcrowded notes. She calls it a curse. I tell her it is a gift. There is nothing wrong with you, Maya. She asks me who with dyslexia has ever really done anything besides this Leonardo da Vinci or Robert Einstein, and I answer, well, I guess no one else really. I mean, besides Pablo, Picasso, Anne Bancroft, John Lennon, Auguste Rodin, Ansel Adams, F. Scott Fitzgerald, W.B. Yeats, Agatha Christie, Muhammad Ali, Maya. Your mind is a gift of greatness. I'd rather see the page like you. Imagine all of the possibilities at once. The paragraphs unhinged, each sentence released by the first hinted promise of a word. Its promise to make us free. My voice is my father in homeroom at 13. Muted. Minus 2 words. Thank you. The only in English he knew. Like the switch got flipped to Spanish, and I'm sifting my memory for shadows folded into syllables that ghost my throat. My father's happenstance gratitude and lonely adolescence now haunt my larynx. My throat is a Catholic school hallway crowded with scar tissue and silence. Everything becomes my musicless throat. The labyrinth of concrete above me. Cracked plates stacked on the kitchenette's heaving chest. An unplanned window in the hem of my love's plaid skirt. Spittle of ice through the haze of dusk in late December. I try to make friends with the silence. Hold its endless weight. Tell myself it is another kind of song. And this, after a life spent filling its bottomless silo with noise, each time we moved, and I had no one to call or share my boredom with. I would invite invented friends into my bedroom. I would coax them into my dreams to listen, and they would sit quietly by the dresser and let me speak. But now, I cannot do anything but rest my ear against that hollow drum of silence. Imagine what I will not be able to hear from my own mouth for another week. There is no proof I will ever again speak, ever offer the tuned vibrations of my electric breath to a room gorged wall to wall with the lustrous splendor of listening. I feast with a banquet of steamed toast on a trio of trills. Yawn my soft palate into grace. Start with 1 minute of sound, then 2, 4, then 8, rebuilding the locomotive of stubborn flesh that pistons tremors through my sacred jaw. I am a child's toy, learning to produce a single note. I am sheet music, bound to the shaky hand of a blind man, straining his memory for chords that just minutes ago rose up through his torso like a flourish of color and foliage in spring. The chord in my throat that is hemorrhaged from misuse is the same instrument I must trust with my life to jumpstart my stalled vocal folds and guide my flawed body back into the world I have abandoned. Faith is a sanguine apparition I move my lips toward. Like a reed I am wetting in preparation for sound. It begins as a soft rumble that undresses its pinched frequency, rattles kinetic like a neutron's frenetic swell of current, and then finally it's there, full-bellied thunder, boundless and unbroken. I'm seeing my father for the first time in 2.5 years, and this is dedicated to him. Eight months shy of 100. And still filled with the wonderment of a child, my grandmother is a revelation tumbling in on itself. Songs and secrets snaked into the creases of her smile. Her 63-year-old hunch is washing dishes in the sink. Her knees in second grade tear through the living room like a derailed train car. Prayer-swollen hips from her wedding photos. Call up to a rosary, ask for life. And I am molded clay from the hands with which she now holds my chubby face. I am small and curious. Ay, mijito, tan bello. These are the words she uses to anchor each day. And I am jealous of how she does the abandon with which she soaks it all up. Her face is a yawning earthquake of tremor and pulse. Her hands the tectonic plates of her body's fierce hope. Her head stuttering out music as it tries to focus on just one thing. Now she takes in my sister. Awkward middle school face of pockmarked acne in her hands. Ay, mijita, tan bella. My sister smiles. She is truly beautiful for the first time in her life. Wears a sash of blushing cheeks. Mijito, my dear child, tan bello, so beautiful. In a world of envy-fueled violence, where hate explodes out of our scars like weeds, the lessened versions of ourselves spreading like wildfire. My grandmother is a revelation tumbling in on itself, a repeating gospel on loop, where each person she meets is a child, returns the miracle and amazement we left in our Velcro shoes, awakens our bodies with the suddenness of her eyes. Everything is beautiful. Keloid and awkward is beautiful. Adolescence is beautiful. Men, for the first time, can be called beautiful. Her hands reach for the sun as though it were food, a cloud. As we walk, she shakes, awed by the emerald hue of fresh grass, hugging her apartment building like jealous, thirsty arms. My abuelita is the ripest hallelujah, where everyone is a child, is a dear daughter, a dear son, has a story and roots and branches twisting embrace through the sterile bars of a subway car, picking it up where every object, moment, everything on the sparkling gasp of an earth is not just beautiful, it is more than beautiful. It is too beautiful. It is so beautiful. Brent and I worked on an album for 2 years that was called Opus. That came out in August in collaboration with Grammy-winning producer Joe West, who is in the United States. Give it up for Joe West. Give it up for Brent Shuttleworth. Give it up for Dr. Afra Atiq. Our dream is to take this all over the world and perform this at festivals and other events across the world. So we'll be outside here if you want to talk to us afterwards. I'm going to do one last piece, and then we have a finale that we're doing together. Give it up for yourselves. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you for being here. Thank you. Why I stayed. Because my grandmother's final days lasted 23 years. And so we'd rush each time. Say goodbye and goodbye. Te quiero mucho, abuelita. Te adoro. Because my mother's truest mother is grief, who taught her the slack-jawed abandon of joy. Because my daughter strung together a 4-syllable word this afternoon. Because I say I love you so much to my wife mid-fight. And we chuckle sometimes between barbs like we forgot which characters we were supposed to play, because I was given a best friend for all of 6 years. And we hand-wrote letters each week in bright ink, dreamed of whose hair would give way first. Because the dusk gave me a reprieve from the storm on the way home from daycare today. Because the rain is a stubborn guard when I am most tired. And grace refuses the chariots, also known as that rickety stroller that has somehow not yet quit. Because Brent metamorphoses those ticking minutes everyone else loses sleep over, shows up an hour early, or makes me wait while I reread the menu I've had memorized for a decade. Because we pretend we don't know what we'll order, ask each other, then get the chicken pot thai every time. Because my sister and brother were once small enough to make a home of my curled arm. Because I loathe their arrival until that moment on the 7th floor of Mount Sinai. Because there are no half siblings. Because my body begins to fail a little more each morning, in minute and quiet increments, like gradual, gorgeous rust. Because I courted death too long, but now dream of my retirement porch. Because my son's scalp at 76 seconds old, the 3 weeks he barely slept for more than 15 minutes, the lunges that shaped my quads and calmed his sobbing just long enough. Because I have wanted to be a father as long as I have feared its weights. Because I exhale knowing I cannot fail what I cannot leave. Because no one I know has grown more in 3 decades than my father. Because right now, the oven is performing its miracles. February is teasing us with its fickle weather. My daughter is coloring in vibrant looping scrawls that look like cartoon fireworks, or the curls wreathing the large eyes she's borrowed from her mother. And finally, Dubai. I'm home.
So we are so incredibly grateful to be here. Thank you for your time and your energy and your love. Carlos and I wrote this piece together. We knew, I think for a really long time, that we wanted to collaborate, and we knew that we wanted to talk about the thing that really brought us together, and that was poetry, and the way that poetry can move the world and everything in it. You ready? Vamos? Let's go.
When language is not enough, I let the poem fill me up, transcending grief and place and time. In every line, a lifeline, like a single ray through a crack in stained glass, like the sky spilling downward when you're at the bottom, like the way silence is broken when an aria cracks you open, like words woven through poems to cast a spell, to be the omen. Please open. My griefs these days give me no reprieve. I'm only whole through line breaks that give me release. You ask what a poem can do. Without Martín Espada, would I have made it through? I was 17, shadow trapped and lost at sea, looking to be anyone but me. Inside a self I could not see, and then I felt his poetry, the bread of angels knowing me as someone other than that armory. A fight relentlessly and silently, prepared for war inside of me. Amidst debris, the tender parts still guiding me. Each stanza made a room to free the best parts in spite of me. My life remains the proof. Without Martín Espada's words, I would not have made it through. When language is not enough, I let the poem fill me up, transcending grief and place and time. In every line, a lifeline.
My imagination, like wildfire, vivid as my first memory. I was 2, maybe 3, sitting on the living room carpet, the dictionary in its deep blue splendor in front of me, flipping pages and glancing over words like somehow I knew these letters and ink would carry me at 10, words spiraling into armor, some words spoken, some not, some silent and buried with weary hands, and some would transform into poems 12 years later, on stages I never dare even dream of. Like somewhere I knew that if light travels in a straight line, then the lines of a poem must also travel in infinite and opposite directions. That regardless of the degree of darkness, syllables will always make words, and words will always make poems, and poems will always lifeline into places we cannot yet reach, because sometimes there is nothing but words. Letters strung together, illuminating even the most silent of spaces to lift and teach. My favorite lessons have always been about light.
Lucille Clifton said, poetry is a matter of life, not just a matter of language.
Et la poésie n'est pas un coïncident des mots, elle est nécessaire pour la lumière du
Como dijo Pablo Picasso, todo lo que puede ser imaginado es real.
وربما يتبع النور القصيدة كما تتبع القصيدة الكلمات.
We build these words to fight anguish.
A matter of life, not just a matter of language.
La poesía es una lumière nécessaire, ma langue.
We cast light when darkness is everywhere. Todo lo que puede ser imaginado es real. Mi lenguaje.
May each word hold grief and joy on every scale. ربما النور يتبع القصيدة لغتي.
Inspire with awe what is shared, we lay bare our flaws.
Like song from quiver jaw.
When language is not enough,
to let each syllable draw.
I let the poem fill me up.
From bottom skyward we claw.
Transcending grief and place and time.
A fire to break the thaw.
In every line,
a lifeline. Give it up again for Brent Shuttleworth. Dr. Afra Atiq, I'm Carlos Andrés Gómez. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you to everybody that made this possible. The Expo team, the team at the Literature Festival, Emirates Literature Foundation, and all of you for sharing this wonderful, wonderful moment with us.
set our souls on fire. Ladies and gentlemen, if you agree that poetry touched our souls, let's hear it for, once again, Afra, Brent, and Carlos. Before we end this event, I'd like to say a huge thank you to you, the audiences, the wonderful AV team, the volunteers helping us out, our title sponsors, Emirates Airline, our founding partner, Dubai Culture, our parent organization, Emirates Literature Foundation, and of course, the wonderful, dynamic trio, Afra, Brent, and Carlos. Thank you and have a good night.